The next poem that we're going to look at is titled An Elegy, and it comes from a collection by Chris Wallace-Crabbe called For Crying Out Loud. It's a very brief poem. It's one of the sadder poems in terms of tone that we are going to look at by Chris Wallace-Crabbe. As in, this is a poem about his son. So Chris Wallace-Crabbe's eldest son passed away. He had an accident and then passed away. This poem is a reflection of sorts on that time in his life. And the title itself, or the form itself, an elegy, is really that type of reflection or a lament for the dead. And so that is what we see with this example from Wallace-Crabbe. And certainly the lamentation, the lamenting tone is really evident throughout this poem. So I'll read through the poem first, as it's not very long, and then we'll have a look at some of the language that's being used. Everything turns out more terrible than they had said, or what I thought at midnight they had said. But the dark marks tracking across clean snow, way down there must be people. That is, if anything on earth can be human when 18 stories below. So that I wish again it were possible to pluck my son out of dawn's moist air by the pylon legs in that dewy green slurred valley before he ever hit the ground, to sweep under his plunge like a pink-tinged angel and gather him, gasping, back into his life. So one of the things to consider straight away about this poem, this elegy, is that it's one continuous sentence from start to finish. It's quite a raw poem, so we'll make a bit of a note of that to start off with. And the idea of it being one continuous sentence, one experience that for the author now is wrapped together, the structure of it makes a lot of sense. It's the news of the accident. It's the place itself. It's the loss and the feeling of the loss and how helpless he feels. For him, the entire experience doesn't stop. It cannot stop. It is one continuous process. And so in that respect, it's a very interesting elegy. It's very raw. Often elegies are spoken at funerals. They are used to publicly reflect on the life of someone after they've passed away, and they're usually quite controlled reflections. Whereas this one is not. It's one continuous flow of emotion. It's one almost a summation of everything that was felt in that instance. The opening of it is interesting in the sense, everything turns out more terrible than they had said, or what I thought at midnight they had said. So immediately we can see the confusion in the moment that often accompanies news like this. And so there is this disorientation from the author right at the start that he's reflecting on after having written the poem. But it's obviously an understandable disorientation, having lost his son. The dark marks tracking across clean snow, way down there must be the people. This is interesting because the perspective that's taken all the way throughout this poem is, it's almost as if Chris Wallace-Crabbe, the author, is looking down on the scene from above. And you can see that as the poem continues as well. This also reflects where his son has passed away. So the 18 stories that he's fallen reflects that height. And it's almost as if Chris Wallace-Crabbe himself is at the top there, looking down on the scene from afar and creating this very abstract, distanced feeling that we get in the first part. In the third verse, we see these moments of contemplation pop up, these moments of silence. That is, if anything on earth can be human, when 18 stories below. Very contemplative structure. And we can see that contemplation as he was writing it. And then some of the verbs and the terminology used in this latter section highlighting, I guess, what Chris Wallace-Crabbe wished in retrospect. So that I wish again it were possible, to pluck my son out of dawn's moist air. We also see him say to gather him up, to sweep under his plunge. So all of these very protective verbs being used, forming part of this wish. Again, he wants to save his son. He wishes that he could save him, to rescue him, to be that parental figure. But at the same time, he knows that he cannot. So we have this contemplation, and that sadness is juxtaposed, if you like, by what is quite beautiful imagery. The dewy, greened, slurred valley, dawn's moist air. So we've got all of this sadness cast against a really beautiful landscape. So in this moment, as he's reflecting on everything that's happened, it's that combination for the author of very deep sadness and a tinge of regret and that desire to protect, and also that desire to turn back time. All of those things are captured here in this one continuous sentence. Very, very sad tone, obviously, considering the content, but also a very raw, emotive contemplation in comparison to some of the other poems in this collection, which also deal with different losses that Chris Wallace-Crabbe has, and reflections both on his father but also on his son. So when you compare this poem with the poem Erstwhile, which is also a reflection on his son after he's passed away, this one is far less controlled, far more raw and emotive. And structurally, you can see that in the way that it's been composed. So that was an elegy by Chris Wallace-Crabbe.